Hi, hello guys, my name is Mia Marie and you are currently watching my Synastry Compatibility series where I go through all the 12 signs, sun signs, and how they get along. Now, as a general disclaimer, we reference so much more than just the sun sign for compatibility, but the importance of the sun and understanding someone's sun sign and accepting it and supporting it is that the sun sign describes the motives, the behaviors, the experiences that contribute to someone's sense of sanity. So we're not talking so much about what someone needs emotionally or how they flirt or what makes them great in bed, all of those very, romantic topics. We're talking about how to support someone's vitality, someone's sense of self, and someone's healing human journey. So keep in mind that this is just a gentle introduction, and you can get so much more by booking a session with me or another fantastic astrologer. 90% of my dad's side of the family is Gemini, so I have been around this energy my whole life. Gemini is the third sign of the zodiac, and so we're still in that personal perspective quadrant as it relates to what the soul wants to do. What does the soul want to do when you're a sun in Gemini? The motive behind all behavior, thoughts, failures, projects, sanity is to lovingly communicate wisdom. Gemini goes around asking questions, collecting information. So when you say you don't like something, Gemini hears, oh, they must not understand it. And they explain to you why you don't like it and where this person is coming from. And the walls start to crumble. And in the place of walls, we have acceptance. We have mutual understanding and connectedness. That's the blessing of Gemini. If you ever dated a Gemini or you're dating one now, you'll recognize that they are always working the room, partially because they're an air sign and they need to communicate. It contributes to their vitality and their life force and their life mission, but also because when you talk to people, you get stories. And Gemini is great at listening to stories. It wants an interesting story, but it's also a gifted storyteller. And in every story is a lesson. And so that's what they're doing when they're going around working the room. And you can be sitting there thinking, oh, am I just not interesting enough? You're always all over the place. You're always talking to people. Why can't you just sit here and be with me now? And the real answer, my genuine response to that is no, they can't just sit there. I mean, on an isolated instance, of course, but if you expect Gemini to sit down next to you and you guys do things together, I mean, unless you can keep up, unless you're just as quick-witted, then that's fine. But if you want them to stay in place, no, they want to work the room. So as I was saying, Gemini is an air sign, which means that it's fueled by communication and intellect. It realizes like, oh, I have a brain and my brain can think different thoughts and these thoughts create realities. Now, because it's this air element is expressed through Gemini, Gemini is focused on collecting information for itself and its immediate environment. So it will likely be a teacher to its family, its children, its partner, its community at large, right? That would be a large expression of Gemini. Usually it's like a classroom of people or a group of people is who it's teaching and talking to. But it's really focused on building a library of information about the world. It wants to squeeze 10 lifetimes into one. They're also known to be duplicitous in nature. Geminis are two-faced, phony, and fickle. The explanation for that is actually quite simple, and the terminology might sound similar. I'm just going to say it first. They have an inner child that just will not quit. Now, I know in mainstream, social media, we hear about inner child healing. They're not focused on inner child healing. There's just a child that wants to play and have fun and engage with life for all the selfish reasons. But then there is this mature adult who has learned and developed and can impart wisdom. And so they teeter between the two in social interactions depending on how they feel. And they enjoy that they can choose to be an adult or a child in any given situation. They also have the legacy of being non-committal. And when I hear that, I think about their mythological parallel. and it's the messenger between the worlds. It's the only character in mythology that doesn't have a home. And I see this through and through with Gemini characters. They want to be on the move. In mythology, the messenger goes from heaven to earth to hell over and over again because it's collecting as much information. As I said before, that's what it lives for. That's what it wants, and that's what it's good at. In fact, it's the only energy that can move in that way. And so when a Gemini thinks about a relationship, it thinks that it has to stay still, that it can't have freedom anymore, or that it is it's liable to someone somewhere, that someone is waiting on them. And even though they may not act like they don't care, it's something that weighs on their mind, like, oh man, I'm not showing up for this person, or I'm not doing this. And it just creates ambivalence towards the idea of relationship. But Gemini is good at relationship once they find someone who they vibe with, who can speak the same language. Or if you can't speak the same language and you're not doing the same things, can exert tolerance and acceptance and encouragement towards their desire to stay on the move. Some deal breakers for Gemini: they don't like a negative Nancy. Anyone who is overly emotional, gets lost in emotions, has a heaviness to their aura, to their vibe, is going to repel them because it's the opposite of what they want. It's the opposite of what makes them feel stable within themselves, even though, they are constantly in motion. I wouldn't consider them to be the most stable. Another thing they can't stand is if you can't have a conversation, playful, witty banter, if you're not intellectual, if you're not learning, if you're not stimulated by ideas and thoughts and theories, and you can't contribute to their overall development as it relates to the intellect and the mind, they're going to get bored and they're going to find you uninteresting. You don't listen, or you're unable to understand what they're communicating. Gemini people, I hear this the most from them. When they have relationship complaints, it's, I don't feel heard. I don't feel understood. I don't feel like you get me. And they're not talking about their vibe. They're talking about what they're literally saying to you. It's like falling on deaf ears. They have the gift of the gab. They want it appreciated. You have to also have an appreciation for humor, because for them, life is a joke. The whole thing is the joke until it's not, and their little child comes out and everything really matters. It's super important. But for the most part, they like to, poke fun at you, and they don't want you to have a full-blown tantrum. So all in all, Gemini is the third sign of the zodiac. It's intellectual. It's here to create a story. It's trying to collect a lot of information. It's a socially oriented sign, and it requires freedom, and not because it doesn't like you or doesn't love you, but because it's trying to stay sane. It's trying to develop and it's trying to grow. Someone with their sun in Capricorn has a soul that came to Earth to learn that when you work productively, you learn patience, persistence, and perseverance. Now, something that not a lot of astrologers talk about, which I find completely baffling, is that Neptune was in Capricorn from 1984 until 1998. And this is a huge influence because, yes, Capricorns are hard workers, and they typically, stereotypically, archetypally know who they are and what they want to do. With Neptune here, you can actually get a character that has no idea who they are. It's almost as if they are Piscean, Capricornian characters. You're dealing with a Capricorn who was born in that time. You might notice that they have a hard time establishing an ego or seeing themselves clearly. There is this, it's almost as if when you take a shower and the mirror is fogged and you try to look at yourself, you can't see yourself. That is a Capricorn with Neptune on the sun. So back to Capricorn energy. Capricorn is the third earth sign. It is the most mature. It takes the security and the competence from Taurus. It takes the systems that Virgo has created, and it goes, okay, how do we turn this into a company? How do we sell this? How do we market this? How do we create revenue? How do we provide for the masses? It's a universally oriented sign. These are typically like the bosses because they are focused on order of operations. They like things done in a specific way. They keep a list of things to do, and they like to check those things off. They get off to being productive. Capricorn is naturally ruled by the planet Saturn, and that's the planet with the ring around it, which is perfect because Capricorn, Saturn energy, it's all about restriction, constriction, knowing boundaries, exercising boundaries, bending to authority, really wanting a position that gives you authority and power. And so oftentimes what you'll find with these people is it's hard for them to play and have fun, to experience joy, because if you're playing around all day, you're not going to be as productive, right? It goes against their motive to be persistent and patient and to persevere against all odds. It's thinking the long haul. What are the decisions that I can make every single day that will turn my life into a legacy? What is my great work? And that is something that will stick with Capricorn their whole lives. Now, something they may not realize is that some of their greatest work is going to be internal. It's going to be something that nobody else sees. They are in so many ways proving themselves to themselves, similar to Taurus, but on a greater scale. The stakes are so much higher. They're in the public eye. And along with that, they care a lot about how other people view them. They want to come off as professional and polished. They like their clothes like iron. They like neutrals, or they just like to give the look like they are all about their business. And if they don't, you can tell depression has many correlations with Saturn energy or Capricorn energy. And so that's their default. And when they're depressed, it's their body trying to scream at them like, this isn't working. This ego that you are working to accomplish. And as a preface, or for clarification, I don't demonize the ego. I think that everyone has one and it must serve a purpose, and the ego is trainable. That's the beauty. You can always train your ego to be in service to your soul. So I'm not slamming egos. Depression is always a call from the soul, and it's saying, I don't want to be this character anymore. I don't want to live this life anymore. I'm tapping out. And when you have that perspective, when you have that awareness, then you're able to adjust your schedule. And it will be something that you have to manage on the outside. And then as you do it, as you start moving your body through the adjustment in your schedule, you'll start to reconnect with yourself, or Capricorn will start to reconnect with themselves. It will also manifest by their habits and their behaviors. When they're not working, they'll work until they're exhausted, and then they'll come home and they'll want to drink or they'll want to smoke. They just want out. Okay, so Capricorns in relationships specifically, it is a duty. It is something that is similar to a job. They want to show up, and they want to show up every day, and they expect that you're going to show up every day. And more than that, they will exercise their own restrictions and expectations onto you. They want you to get on board with their schedule. They are a leadership sign. They're a cardinal sign. And so you will find that they really take you under their wing, and they want you guys to excel together. In my personal experience, I found that Capricorn does appreciate partnership, but it doesn't do the flings. It wants marriage. It wants kids. It wants the earthly representations of accomplishment. They are reliable. They are consistent. They are on top of it. They're on top of what you're doing, what you're not doing, what you should be doing. And they have an eye for things that are flawed, and they'll point it out to you. They can kind of have a more serious or stoic attitude towards life, and it's very matter of fact when you're with them. They have this dry quality to their personality that people can find endearing. Now, some deal breakers with Capricorn. If you are not thinking long term, if you don't want a serious relationship, if you don't want to be married or have children or buy a house or grow old together, that is a Capricorn thing, then they will dismiss you quite quickly. They don't want to entertain games, and they don't appreciate when you try and toy with them because they will show up for you. They take life seriously, and they take themselves seriously, which means they also take you seriously, and they expect you to act as a mature, grown, and responsible adult at all times. Now, if you're someone who's a little bit more spontaneous, like for example, in my personal experience with Capricorn, I like to do things on a whim. I can't stand a plan. I like just putting myself out there and having a fun time, watching where life takes me. If you have that type of an attitude, they are going to contract. They may get on board depending on their other placements, but there's something inside of them that gets nervous, and they kind of like do this, they don't like it, and they might judge you, and they may call you impulsive. They don't appreciate impulsivity. They don't appreciate things that are done on a whim because it's not well thought out. You're not thinking of the consequences of your actions. What if you get lost? What if you run out of money? What if blah, 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 blah. They're going to name all the cautionary things that you didn't think about as you're trying to bungee jump off of a cliff. Piggybacking on that, they are risk averse. They don't like putting themselves in situations where they may fail. Because what does that show about them? What does that prove about them? That means that they aren't this authoritarian character or authoritative character, depending on whichever one they subscribe to, high functioning, low functioning. They don't like to look stupid. They like to come off as someone who can manage the masses. And so they will avoid situations where there is a greater probability that they will fall on their face, or they have a hard time surrendering to the unknown. And they will criticize you for putting yourself in that situation until they see that you have been successful. So if you're someone who enjoys challenge, risk, and thrills, expect to have like a sit-down conversation where it's like, they're the principal and you're the student, and they're like, listen to me. This is the rules. This is what we do. Another thing they won't appreciate is if you don't take your life seriously. If you are not accomplishing things on a daily basis, or if you have nothing to prove for your day or your energy or your effort, they like to show their person off. They like to feel as if they have also won a prize. They are a prize, and so is their person. They like the power couple idea. And so if you are a little bit, if you're not as ambitious, or if your ambitions don't yield material, again, representations of success and accomplishment, they're not going to gravitate towards you. But all in all, they're about their business. And if you are with them, then you are their business. So they're focused on the long term. They want commitment. They will show up for you. They will want to provide for you. They will want to make you feel like your relationship is stable and your home space is stable, and you guys can do whatever you like because you have the funds in the bank. Sun in Gemini, Sun in Capricorn. I wonder how you guys even ended up in the same room together. What a combination we have. Okay, so we have an air sign Gemini and an earth sign Capricorn. So by default, we have two elements that don't exactly mesh well together. And the main way this may manifest, although subtly, is that you guys use and create energy in very different ways. Capricorn gains energy by sleeping, resting, being at home, your typical run-of-the-mill self-care. Gemini is not that way. Gemini wakes up, and sure, its body is rested, but it needs to generate energy. It doesn't have the ability to create energy by sleeping. It has to be in motion to generate the same type of energy that Capricorn wakes up with. And so what you see is when these two step out into the world, Capricorn starts draining its energy and Gemini starts getting it. And so it's like, there's like a sweet spot throughout the night where you guys are on the same level, but otherwise you guys are totally opposite in terms of energy expenditure. Now, Gemini is a personally oriented sign, which means that it's focused on itself. The questions that it asks, in fact, the questions of a Gemini's life will determine the quality of their life. The questions that they ask about life will determine the quality of their life. And so it's like they come into this world with two magnifying glasses as eyes, and they're trying to collect as much information, squeeze 10 lifetimes into one. They appreciate an intellectual type of fluidity. They can have really strong opinions and then change their opinions overnight, and they need to be able to do that. They are a gifted debater, and they like picking at your brain and trying to find the flaws in your logic, and they're not taking really anything too seriously. This is also a sign that is homeless in terms of mythology. Gemini is the only person who doesn't mind moving around from hell to heaven to earth. Not in that order, obviously, but they like to travel and be on the move. Now, Capricorn is a universally oriented sign and loves stability as an earth sign. It likes things that are predictable. It works really slowly and steadily towards accomplishing a great work, something that in the eyes of other people is also a great work. It's in charge of our public image and being professional and polite and studious and successful on the material plane. Gemini doesn't seem to concern itself so much with those types. It doesn't really want a status. And some of the problem issues, I guess I'll just start there, is that Gemini might find Capricorn to be too unenthusiastic about life. Things are kind of stoic and dry and distant, and life is a task rather than an adventure and a celebration. And, Gemini may also find that Capricorn requires that things be too stable and predictable. This is true for all earth signs, and it's not because Capricorn is inherently boring. What we're talking about is just two people who operate very differently and are good at what they do, right? They're spending their whole lives trying to cultivate Gemini, an opinion, a library of information that dissolves boundaries. And Capricorn is here to collect information in order to create structure, or even in some cases, a hierarchy. And so they are kind of working at cross paths. In fact, when they're both shining their brightest, there is a tendency to irritate the other person by just being themselves if you guys do not grant the permission, for the person to do that. Now, Gemini may give Capricorn a little bit more grace because it doesn't take things too seriously. It will just feel like, oh, you're boring. But Capricorn will have some very choice words for Gemini's seemingly childish behavior and dualistic nature. Gemini is known to be two-faced, but in actuality, what it is, it's a combination of Peter Pan syndrome, the child inside of themselves, and then the grown, wise, old adult who has collected information and stands before us as a teacher. And so Gemini doesn't really appreciate engaging in like lower level childish behavior. It kind of puts itself in the position of being a father, and it can create this dynamic where Capricorn is constantly trying to exert authority over Gemini in a way that squanders its vitality and its sanity. Now, I will say initially there is this kind of interesting dance between the two because they are so different and because they operate in ways the other person doesn't naturally understand. They will gravitate towards each other, but we run the risk of projecting something that doesn't actually exist. And so Capricorn will look at Gemini and be like, oh wow, you're really fun. Like there is a charge to this person, and they're exciting, that they feel a little bit enlivened by the Gemini's presence. And Gemini will look at Capricorn like, man, what is this discovery box? I know that there's something totally interesting and dynamic and playful in here, but I have to get to the bottom of it. And, soon enough, those delusions kind of fall to the wayside, and they see where the other person truly stands, and if it does or doesn't support where they are currently in life, and they will kind of both retreat into their natural respective corners. At the beginning, I was kind of talking about how Capricorn can fall into the role of being the parent and Gemini the child, and I actually think that is beneficial to you guys because Gemini doesn't want to handle real world things, but it needs to. And so it will feel a sense of relief that Capricorn cares so much about the long-term plan and how much money we're spending and, what exactly are our action items and how these action items contribute to a sense of stability that, Gemini doesn't want but needs. And Capricorn might feel a sense of fulfillment or a sense of purpose by taking care of a Gemini. Is that what love is supposed to be founded on? No. Can we fall into some pretty slippery territory? Definitely. But then again, people are multifaceted, and this is just one configuration of literally 2,000 per person, just about. So, if you guys have, the same moon sign, or if you guys have a Venus sign that works really well together, or, oh my gosh, one of my favorite combinations is if the moon sign is conjunct the ascendant or the sun is conjunct the ascendant, we have this spiritual bond that allows you guys to stick with each other. Otherwise, Gemini doesn't really like to stick to anything for the long run, and don't even think about being flirty and fun and towards other people. Capricorn will take even the slightest initiation towards someone else as an act of infidelity, and it's not okay. You'll be pulled into the principal's office. So if you would like to learn more about your relationship with a Gemini or a Capricorn with me, you can find me at onerising.com/services. Toodles.